Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tabletop role-playing game showcase. I'm Steven, and I'm joined by Dan, if he's there.
I I'm currently having issues. I'm Dan.
And also joining us today is special guest Mickey Barfield, the writer of the game we're looking at today, Dark Times.
Hello, how you doing?
Doing all right. So,
Good.
Dark Times is a cyberpunk mixed with supers tabletop RPG. Is written by Mickey here, and it was published in 2019. So this is actually a really recent game. Probably our most recent game that we've done on this podcast so far. And yeah, I guess let's just dive into it without further ado. Mickey, you want to tell us about the setting?
Well, I mean, you kind of nailed it right on the head where you say it's a cyberpunk setting with supers. But the best way to that I describe it usually is imagine if you're in a cyberpunk setting and corporations have figured out a way to create their own supers, and they see them as company property as well. So you have kind of almost like a resurgence of indentured servitude, almost slavery-like, where the corporations have deemed it, where we created you, you have part of our patents in you, so therefore we own you. And it's got to the point where corporations have really dug their heels into the politics, and even though there's a government, it's really pretty much obvious it's more of a corpocracy than a democracy, where corporations are the ones who are ruling. And so you're playing characters who are either A, most likely wanting to be free of the yokes of the corporations and try and help out your fellow brothers and sisters who are also seen as these indentured servants. Or you could play somebody who's a company lapdog, ready to toe the company line. Or C, you could actually be a mutant. Now, mutants were kind of the first creations and the cast-offs, the freaks, and their power sets are even different. And it's gotten so bad where the corporations were able to convince the government to deem them as not human, and therefore they could be exterminated just like rats. So those mutants would often live underground in other certain areas that are a mutant community. And so you have this real mishmash of, just corporations digging at each other, enhanced people either looking out for each other or battling against each other, depending on which side they picked to try and balance out. So it's got a real wide variety of things you can pull from to run games with. Hopefully that wasn't too much.
No, that's perfect. I really actually like the setting a lot for this system. Like, I really like what you did with the setting because I feel like it puts the punk back into cyberpunk, because I feel like a lot of cyberpunk games lately focus more on the like the tech, or like the playing mercenaries and morally gray, and working with mega corporations, even though they may not be the best, but you gotta do it for the money. And it's like, but that's not what it was originally about. It was about being like, fuck the man. It was about
Cyberpunk was really originally kind of one of those things where it was a platform for people to write about social issues.
Exactly. It was about fighting back against just being rubbed out and turned into a cog. It was about expression. It was about individualism, and I feel like Dark Times gets back to the roots of that, because the whole idea of corporations owning you and fighting back against that and being your own person instead of property is inherently really punk, and really gets back to the roots of what cyberpunk is all about, instead of just being this sort of black trench coat mercenary nonsense that it seems to have devolved into over the years.
Yeah, it was kind of a cool concept back in the 80s when the games started to pick up things like Cyberpunk, Shadowrun, which was, I played plenty of them, ran plenty of those games. But when you read a lot of the things like, William Gibson, George Alec Eppinger, John Walter Williams, a lot of these things, and even the godfather of them all, Philip K. Dick, you really see it's more of how mankind has devolved and lost its humanity. And somewhere in the heart of it, they're still striving to try and find some shred of humanity amongst all this chaos and this crap, and how the corporations have just smothered out almost the essence of humanity to the point where we're this homogenized meat machine that's meant to generate money. And somewhere along the way, somebody had to wake up and say, what the hell? Let's fight this establishment.
Yeah, exactly.
That is basically the perfect platform for that, because the other thing that we kind of make the analogy with is actually the early days of piracy, which I know it's a stretch when you hear that, but think of it this way. Back in the early days of piracy, most of those pirates were either political prisoners that got freed by the pirates and said, hey, come work with us, rather than serving these assholes here. Also, too, you had articles of agreement to try and, have some sort of organization to try and fight against the establishment and try and make a living for yourself and for you and your brothers on your boat. But also, too, you can even look at it this way. We broached in this game. We call them the SMEs, subject matter experts, which basically one corporation might hire out an enhanced to say, listen, we know that you are company property to Cadmus Biolytics, okay? We know you're property to them, but we want you to work with us. And if you just do jobs for us and you can screw over all these other guys, we don't care. We'll actually help you do that. And basically, we'll give you shelter, we'll give you pay, things like that. So therefore, they get this letter, which is a subject matter expert, which basically gives them some sort of shelter. So it's almost in a way like the privateers used to do way back when as well.
Yeah. And then on top of that, we also got the cyberpunk staples of hacking or stuff like that. But I guess we'll get to that. We'll get to that down the road. Yeah. So let's talk about basic mechanics. Dad, you want to handle this one?
Basic mechanics generally fall into the skill tests or combat. I'm going to start with skill tests.
Okay.
Those are really simple. Whatever you have for the skill, because you pick those, or you set those up during character creation. Mm-hmm. You roll however many die, keep highest, and add a relevant stat to whatever you're attempting to do. So generally, if you're doing combat, you'll end up almost always using either strength or reflex, unless you're very creative. But, where are all the skills? Hang on. Gotta scroll down to find those. There we go. Say, electronics. That's almost always guaranteed to be a...
intelligence.
Intelligence check. Mm-hmm. But you have other ones... Oh, sorry. Oh, something in my throat. You have other ones like law, which you could use several things. Just convincing other people what you said is the law. You could reasonably convince the GM if you use charisma. Mm-hmm. So those generally, and then you have combat, which most of the time works similar, with the exception of criticals, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, we'll get into combat later, but basically the basics mechanics of the game is just you have a pool of dice. It ranges from 1d6 to 3d10, usually with anywhere from 1 to 3 die and anywhere from d6s to d10s. You roll your pool, you take the highest, add your attribute, done. It's not terribly complicated. I mean, granted,
What made us a little different was because actually when we first rolled out Spy, our mechanic was different.
Oh, really?
I felt like, this is felt it was a little too common. And I was at a convention and I was at the booth and it was kind of a slow period and I had this epiphany one thing I noticed about most games is skills seem to have a certain linear tracking. What I mean by that is your level of education versus your level of proficiency. Now, let's say, Steve, let's say you and I go to college, and we both study engineering for 4 years, okay? Now, obviously, our education level is high. So in this game here, a D10 is qualified as good education, because it goes from D6, D8, D10. D6 means you're barely educated, D8 means you're somewhat educated, D10, you're very well educated. Now, let's say 4 years after we both graduated from college of engineering, I've been selling shoes this whole time, but you've actually been working as an engineer for 4 years. So your level of proficiency is better than mine. What that means is how many dice you're tossing. So obviously you're going to be tossing 3 dice, keep the best of those 3, because you can recall what you're doing a lot faster and a lot easier. Whereas me, I would only have a 1 because I don't really use it anymore. So I got to roll 1 and hope I get pretty good because I'm a little rusty on that.
Yeah, I do like that. It's a really clever way of doing it because it's sort of it's a twofold thing of like, well, do you know how to do it and have you been doing it, as opposed to just like, you know, a flat skill bonus where it's just, okay, you're getting better and getting better and getting better. There's 2 ways you can improve, which is pretty cool. I do like that a lot.
No, it is a slow progression, I will admit that, but I never have like games where, you know, you start off level 1, you know, you're struggling against kobolds, let's say, and then by level 20, you know, you pretty much just, oh, I stepped on a kobold, oh dear, someone scrape him off.
Please. Also, another thing I do like about it too is that it's not super bloated, because like I've seen other systems use these sort of, you know, pool roll, take the highest, like Deadlands Classic did the same thing, where, you know, you would have...
Yeah.
But the difference being that, you know, that didn't have a cap on how high you could go with the dice, and it also didn't have a cap on how big that pool could be. And then on top of that, if you rolled maximum, then the dice explode, and just you could just keep rolling higher and higher and higher. So like the numbers got real wonky in that game.
Oh yeah, it turned into like a nuclear escalation.
This keeps it nice and like contained in a way. So there's not so much number bloat. You know pretty well what the difficulty should be. The difficulty numbers are pretty accurate, and at the same time there is a nice amount of variance in there because, you know, stepping up a die actually does increase your chances of rolling higher by a lot.
Yeah. When we were designing this, we did a lot of number crunching as far as averages and stuff like that, and this was our best combination we felt. Also, too, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do dig a good D20 game, but I bought a polyhedral set of dice, and I want to use them all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now,
so,
granted, we don't use D20s too much in our game.
I don't think I've ever seen it come up, actually.
It's rare. It's really rare.
It's really, really rare.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on into character creation, which is actually, I love this character creation. It's actually, it feels nice. So
okay, good.
So basically, there's a few steps to it. It's a little bit, maybe a bit more steps than some games, but granted, definitely not as many steps as others. I think it's a nice sort of mid ground in terms of like in depth, I guess you would say, but it's definitely got a nice amount of customization. I really do enjoy that in the game.
Yeah, the good thing is, and I've heard this from other people, is that they don't feel like your characters are all going to have the same stuff. Like some games I've played before, it's like, well, 10 different people have the same thing here.
Yeah.
We like to have a lot of options.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that actually when we talk about the powers, because that was something really interesting. But anyway, so to start with, you know, you pick your corporate DNA strand, which I think is a great way of like getting around the issue of that it's an all-human game and you don't really have races. The corporate DNA strand is kind of like your race. It determines what your certain benefits, like attribute bonuses, or maybe getting a special talent, or extra points to buy powers with, or extra hit points, or extra energy points, which is it
depends on who manufactured you.
Exactly. Depending on who manufactured you, gives you certain benefits. And again, it sort of makes it so you can have quote unquote races within being all humans, and gives you a nice little bit of customization and makes people feel different than just without having to be, a magical creature or anything.
Well, technically speaking, you can even play a non-enhanced person in the game.
Yeah, you could be a non-enhanced person. That gives you more of the what I have started to call the cinematic points that modern systems seem to have nowadays, where you get that little bit of storytelling, control, dice rerolls, other things like damage reduction, other things like that. But in this game it's called scene points. You get extra scene points if you're an unmodified human. Granted, you don't get any powers, but there's some fun things that you can do with that, and we'll get into that with the when we get to that bit. So there's a whole bunch that you can choose from. They all give different benefits. It's all part of the build. Then we do a cool little background thing, which is the life path. I think I always enjoy a good life path. This one's pretty straightforward. Doesn't have too much mechanically tied to it, but at the same time, it does give you some nice prompts for backstory and and role playing and other such things like that. There are a few things mechanically tied to it. We'll get to that as we go. So the first thing that you do is you choose what generation you are, which determines not only how old you are, but also if you're allowed to take powers or not. Which, Mickey, you can explain. I'll let you explain that, because that's actually tied directly to the setting stuff.
Well, I mean, for the most part, if you're rolling on there, you're going to have obviously somebody who has some connection to something. So, because it's going to help you kind of pick your corporate Dna Strand.
I was talking about the generational thing. We have the first generation, which is your original test subject. Of the powers thing.
Versus zero generation.
Versus second generation. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Basically, if you have a corporate Dna Strand, which, unless you pick somebody who's
unmodified,
you're going to have that. So, a lot depends on which character creation, which you're going to have. It's going to be first or second generation. So.
Yeah, the first generation is basically someone who was originally tested on,
right.
And they, as I don't remember if we noted this when we were talking about the setting, but the first round of test subjects actually didn't manifest any powers, so
not right away, no.
Yeah, so they either became mutants or just didn't get powers at all, and they were deemed failures. So a lot of them most
of the mutants actually were the cast-offs from the other companies trying to perfect what Prometheus Medical had done.
Right.
And basically, they're like, okay, these are our throwaways. And not all of them were exterminated. Some got loose, some got away. And over time, they had babies with other babies. And so they are a whole different thing. So when you're dealing with a mutant, you're not even really dealing with generational things so much. It's more like, just go straight to the mutation part and deal with that, because even the character build on that is a little different from playing mutants.
Yeah, the whole thing. So mutants were like a whole thing, but basically everyone who was tested on at first, especially in Prometheus, were considered failures because they didn't manifest any powers. But then when they started having kids, and those kids started hitting puberty, the kids started manifesting powers, and that's why the corporations are like, okay, but we own you, and the kids are like, hey, whoa, hold on. Which is again why
slavery.
Yeah, which is again why that's
Sorry, I keep interrupting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, which is again why I sort of like say that this whole setting is very punk, because it's like these guys are trying to come in and tell you that we own you, despite you never having met them, despite you never having had not necessarily even having had any interaction with them for your entire life, and then they come in and say, hey, we own you. So, of course you're going to want to fight back against that, which I love, because, and that's like again, that's like I've said, it's very punk,
Oh, yeah, it definitely is.
So yeah, if you're a first generation, you don't get any powers. you were considered a test failure, and that means you are 26 years or older because of the amount of time that's passed in universe. If you're second generation, you get access to powers. You're 26 years or younger. However, the main difference between them, and you would say, well, why would I ever not choose second generation, even if I didn't want powers? Well, the answer is because second generation gets less points for having things like cybernetics and nanotech. So if you wanted to play a heavily cybered up or nano machined up character, you're gonna probably want to play a first generation or generation 0, because those guys get more points towards that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
And then the second part of the background stuff is the corporate stamp, and I think this is really clever and really, really cool bit of fluff, because it basically says, hey, you've got a stamp on your body somewhere that says you are property of X corporation. Like, you can't escape the fact that you are owned by someone. It's a permanent fixture on you. And then you can, like, it will either match your DNA strand, or even more fun is that you could have it be a mismatch, in which case, like, it says, yeah, you probably got kidnapped or something, or bought out by another company who said, all right, we own you now. Even if they made you, we own you, though.
Yeah, think of it as almost like a biological VIN number.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So then we go through this little life path thing. You roll for your parents, your family status, which determines some your family status helps determine your starting money, and can range from being a gutter orphan to being an executive family. And oh boy, having that executive family status can get you a lot of starting cash. You can get some...
but also too, it provides a lot of story for the GM too.
Oh, exactly. Exactly, because
they still got their hooks in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, like, if your family is like, hey, yeah, no, they own you, but we own you as a property. You're not just our child, we own you too. It's like, yeah, you're kind of now dealing on both fronts of, like, your family, like, wanting to owning you, and then you fighting back against that potentially, or do you join with them, or whatever. So it's really, it can provide some nice, interesting complexity and character. Then you roll for siblings, you roll for childhood events, adolescence events, and then adult events, which also can affect your starting funds.
Oh yeah.
So then we move into actually making your character. You got your attributes. You divvy up 18 points amongst them. You have
one.
You have to have at least one in each, and you can't go above a 5 in any of them under normal circumstances unless you're using powers. You have, what, 6 stats? You have your strength, health, reflexes, willpower, charisma, and intelligence.
Yep.
For the most part, they all do what they say. Health is the only oddball that I'll explain, because that sort of acts as like a constitution roll, as well as helps determine your max HP, your energy points, which is like mana, and how quickly you heal naturally.
Yep.
Everything else is pretty much self-explanatory.
Yeah, if you've heard an RPG, they'll make sense.
Yeah. Also, the other interesting thing I'll note is that your damage bonus in melee is determined by strength. But it's not like other systems where it's just a flat numerical bonus. You actually get extra dice, or a dice penalty to your damage roll, depending on what your strength is. And it ranges from -1d3 all the way up to +2d10.
Yep.
Scene points, we talked about that.
A lot of damage in melee.
Oh boy, can you. So we'll get into that. But yeah, the next bit is archetypes, and this is, I think, a really clever thing, because I normally am not the biggest fan of class-based systems, because I feel like they're a little bit restrictive sometimes. But archetypes are a nice, like, hybridization of the point buy and the class. Your archetype provides a sort of class framework that you can work within, where it determines special abilities you can pick up, like that they call talents, that are tied directly to the archetype, and those are really fun and really help sort of define your character, as well as give you cool stuff you can do that not many other people can, that other people in the party might not necessarily be able to do, as well as determines, and this is the really important thing, and the most interesting, I think, about this system, determines what powers you can pick up. So, going through, we've got Blaster, which is if you want to play someone who can, fly around and shoot energy blasts or use elemental powers or other things like that, you're going to be a Blaster. They're pew pew pew. You got your Brick, who are just like your suit. Like, if you want to be the Hulk, you want to be a Brick. Now, I really like Bricks simply because it's like the girl on the cover here. I'm gonna flip back to that real quick. She is the canon Brick pre-gen character in this game, and just the idea of like being this cool like cyberpunk superpowered character who can just like pick up like a friggin' piece of rebar and start beating the crap out of people is awesome. Love Bricks.
I have one complaint. There is nothing in the book about strength and approximately how much you can lift with a strength stat.
We didn't get that in there. Yeah, we've been chastised for that. So a couple of us, who have been key in developing it, we've kind of gone back and forth. So I'm hoping soon on our next supplement I can actually have that in there.
I'm also
you're not the only person who's actually mentioned that. So
yeah. I'm also going to say I do love the fact that you have a talent in the Brick where you can just literally punch someone so hard you just send them flying like an 80s action movie or an anime, just BAM! And they go soaring back like 20 feet into a brick wall. It just feels amazing doing that.
You have to have some knockback, yeah.
Oh, it feels good. Then we got one of my favorite archetypes, even if I've never played it. I just love it for the name, and that's the Gun Bunny. Because Gun Bunny is the best name for something ever.
Well, and that's very apropos. You see that, and it says it all right there.
Yeah, you know it's on tin. You're using guns. You are the cool guy with all the guns. If you want to be the Punisher, you be a Gun Bunny. Then we got the Martial Artist, which is interesting because it's not quite the Brick. But it's definitely, it's like an alternate version of if you want to do melee focused combat. Like it's more like
access to a lot of different powers, but not at high levels. They can get a lot of different low level things.
Yeah,
they have a great versatility.
They're very customizable. They're very it's like you said, versatile.
Basically, it's the Uber Ninja.
Yeah, if you want to be an Uber Ninja, if you want to be straight out of an 80s kung fu movie, if you want to do like crazy anime stuff, you can be a martial artist and you can do
for melee fighting that they can get. That they're one of the few classes that can get all of the power. But most powers they have access to, they can't get more than 1 or 2 levels.
Yeah, but they can get a wide variety, everything from like things that Bricks would get, blasters, and like across the board. Then next is the Mentalist. This is if you want to be a psychic. The Mentalist, interestingly enough, feels like it's the most limited in terms of powers.
Yes and no.
But it has some really, really good. It has some really, really, really good talents. Like, Ahead of the Game is fantastic because you get a hideout and extra money, a lot of extra money at the start of every adventure, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's well, you gotta think about it. If they can pilfer people's minds and do things like that, to some degree, even the person with probably the best moral compass might be tempted to try and bend things to gain favor in certain ways. And what better way is to either get better pay, get a better apartment, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're a very utility sort of archetype, which is definitely always useful, but definitely not like if you're wanting to play like someone who's like smashing stuff in combat, you probably should go with something else. Or
They're good
play
support characters.
They're very good support characters and very good outside of combat, especially.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Just pick up a gun. You'll be fine.
Better hire some meat monkey.
Yeah. Nexus Movers. This is if you want to be the Flash or Sonic the Hedgehog. They're fast. They go fast. They go really, really fast, and that's about it.
Or fly.
Or fly.
Going fast in some way or another.
One way or another, they go really fast. And what makes them great, what makes them good, is that you actually have rules in here for what's it called? High velocity damage. Where if you if you run at someone and just slam them as you go by, the faster you're going, the more damage you're doing. And if you can, as a mover, you can get up really, really fast. So you can land a wall up on someone.
Oh yeah.
Classes that, sorry, go ahead.
And there's our art for
Most
the mover, which is pretty cool.
that get the movement powers, they can get really moving, especially the ones that can get more than one kind.
Oh yeah.
Because there are like 3 or 4 different ways to fly or move fast.
And with the flying especially, it stacks,
And
so you can go
combine them.
fast. Yeah, it's crazy. And then there's the talent that lets you just carry someone with you, which makes it extra ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Next is the Mutant, which is sort of its own thing. We'll probably talk about that when we talk about powers, because mutants are interesting. You get some. They have some really good. They have some really good talents, and they've also got some of the best access to some of the best powers in the game, arguably.
They're not the most powerful powers, but they're unique, different, and unlike the other people.
And they're really. And since you have access to all the mutations at any given time, in order to build your character when you're at creation, you actually have probably the best one of the best varieties for power, in my opinion. Like the ability, like the amount of what you can, like the strength of the powers that you're getting, and the variety of the powers that you're getting is probably only matched by the Oddball, but the Oddball doesn't really get as good of talents either. So mutants definitely have their place that is really good.
Yeah.
The downside though is you can't get powers, you can't get cybertech, you can't get nanotech, you can't have a charisma higher than 3, so forget playing a face, and you can be exterminated without repercussions. So
Yep.
you gotta face the downsides.
Playing mutant.
Yeah. How there are talents that let you sort of like ignore some of those, but like leak through DNA is great. It's a really good one.
Oh yeah. That's my personal favorite.
Yeah, it's like almost like not. I wouldn't say guaranteed, but it's very close to being you should pick it up in any given build because it's just that good.
Mm-hmm. I've had a couple of villains I've made before who were mutants who had that, and they wound up being some of the toughest SOBs they had to fight because they had this combination that just was
unbeatable. We're
annoying more like it to them.
we're doing a campaign right now where we have a mutant basically playing like a trailer park trash type of lady.
Oh, that was Big Mama, was it?
Big Mama, yeah.
That's it, yeah. Because I was listening to it, it's like, oh my gosh, you know.
It was amazing.
It's like reality stars gone wild.
Oh man! And the best part is she picked up the leak through DNA, got the hereditary power to change size, so she could become the size of a blue whale. and plans to do that at some point. Just to smash into someone in just rollerball form.
Hey, you gotta use it.
Yeah, oh god, that was hilarious. Next is non-powered, which I actually love non-powered, especially in a cyberpunk system. Because, like, in a cyberpunk system, it has its own niche. That, because, like, the idea behind the non-powered is you don't get any powers, but you're basically an 80s action hero who's able to do, you know, like, the, like, cool dodging bullets, are super charming, super lucky, super rich, you know, or like super skilled, whatever. You've got all this stuff that makes you a cool action hero man. And in a cyberpunk game, it actually works really well because you can still get cool stuff. You just get cyberware. You know, you amp yourself up with technology. It works out really well. And you can definitely go toe-to-toe with some of these superheroes. Much more reasonably than like other systems. Like, I mean, well, I want to do an episode on Wicked Packs with you at some point, Mickey.
Oh yeah.
But like, because like in that one, it's, you know, modern day mages, and we still have the unpowered guy who can't do any magic, but is kind of like a cool action hero, and it just doesn't quite feel as good. Just because it's like, well, like, you know, it's like in this you got your cyberware to like sort of even the playing field. In that one, it's like, maybe a gun will help you, but I don't know, man. I wouldn't want to go up against these guys.
Well, there's actually that's a whole different story there on that one.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it on that episode. But
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's definitely like it definitely feels in this one it feels like a really viable option.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yeah.
And then we have the Oddball, which is sort of the catch-all if you're like, well, I want to do a weird custom build with my character. Oddball's the
variety of powers available.
Largest variety of powers, and you get to pick an archetype talent from any archetype as well as a general talent, instead of being able to take 2 archetype talents. And then you also get to pick a skill that you're really, really good at. So if you want to do like a crazy custom build, Oddball's the way to go, and you can do some bonkers stuff with it.
There are limitations on those, though. Oddballs can't get quite as powerful as some of the people who have focused on things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they can't go as high, but they just have a wide variety, kind of like the martial artist, but not nearly as good. Even. Then we have the Skulker, which is sort of your rogue archetype. If you want to like have sorts of like more debilitating powers or more like sneaky, infiltration-y sort of powers.
Right.
All good stuff, and gives you a lot of talents that allow you to do sort of roguish things, which are always fun.
Also have, in what is, in my opinion, the best talent in the game, well-stocked hideaway.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a really, really good one.
That's
Just
my personal fave.
Gives you everything that you need at any given time. Ready to go.
Well, in a world like this, you need a stash house, you know?
You really do.
Well, you can essentially create a new one every session.
Now, it's not some big glorious place, but if it's some sort of crappy, you know, 1-bedroom, you know,
it's a crappy hole.
With some canned goods and maybe a few clips and a gun, you know, and the first aid kit, then hey, great. You know?
It's a crappy hole in the wall that's got everything you could possibly need on hand, ready to go.
Right.
But that's all you need it to be, really.
Yeah. Shelter in a storm.
Exactly. I like Skulkers. I mean, I'm not as thrilled about, like, they're again sort of like the Mentalist, a little lacking in terms of power variety, but what they get does make sense for them, and they do make for a very good utility infiltrator sort. Just again, don't expect to be like throwing around crazy powers in combat.
No, but they'll help you complete the mission.
Oh yeah, they will. They absolutely will.
Yeah.
So once you pick your archetype, you get to pick 2 talents, I believe, and they can be archetype talents, or you can also pick from the general talents, which there's a lot of, and there's actually some great stuff in here. Everything from having an alternate ID, so that way if you need to pull something out of your ass, so you're not identified by cops sniffing around, then you're pretty safe to go. Or being ambidextrous to dual wield easily, or having extra hit points, allies, being super hot, being fast, being lucky, whatever. You can also get an extra talent by taking a complication, and these range from everything from coward, bloodthirsty, cyber rejection, fat, which Big Mama took, of course. Having enemies, foul-tempered, there's all sorts of stuff. Some of them feel less bad than others, but definitely all of them are going to have an effect, and you're not going to be able to avoid these real easily. So, which I applaud you for, because a lot of games are bad at that.
Oh?
I've seen so many games with point-based flaw, talent flaw, quality impediment, trait, whatever what you want to call it. Every game has a different name for it. So many of them do a sort of point-buy thing where they have different weights to them. And while I do like that, a lot of times the flaws can fall short by basically being entirely roleplay based, and if the GM just doesn't tap them, then you basically have just gotten free points. Gotcha. So having everything have mechanics tied to them is very, very useful and very good. It's good to have, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Then you pick your skills, you get points to spend in those. Again, we talked about how that works, of having the level of learning and versus plus practical usage determining what your pool is and what dice type you roll. And then you get to pick powers, of which there is lots of fun stuff. So you can pick from the hereditary powers list if you're a second generation. If you're a mutant, you can pick from the mutations. And as long as you're not a mutant, you could also pick from the cybertech list and the nanotech list, which cybertech not as powerful, I think, as nanotech, or is it just more expensive in terms of
power level? It looks like, but they have a lot of different things they can do.
Right.
The nanotech is it kind of apes to some degree some of the abilities, not quite all of them, and nowhere near to that degree. So what you can do is you can actually even make some bad guys who might be some corporate goons who've been juiced up with certain nanotech to try and ape some of these things, but they're not quite as good as the real deal. See what I'm saying?
Right. The difference between them, I guess, mainly is that cybertech is visible, usually pretty visible, and nanotech is not, because nanotech is in your bloodstream.
Right. Now, the cybertech is a lot cheaper because it is kind of obvious, where nanotech is much more sleek, much more subtle, and much more expensive.
And is it expensive in terms of... I know it's expensive in terms of credits, but is it expensive in terms... But there's another stat that you have to pay attention to, and this is, again, where your generation comes into play, where you have a limit on how much tech you can get shoved into your body.
Right, your technological limit...
Yeah, because as with most cyberpunk games,
in terms of limit points.
As with most cyberpunk games, everybody talks about this is something that everybody talks about. Every cyberpunk game has this, where it's you can only get so much before you start becoming not human anymore. So, and that's represented nicely by the technology limit.
Yeah, well, it's really it's more of a way to keep players from just jamming so much tech in their body that it's okay, how much of them is human and how much do we need to tell them to stop, because I need to make this game balanced to some degree. That's usually your real reason for these things being created. But there's also the thing of how much of your humanity you want to carve away.
Exactly. I do like that you didn't have like a severe mechanic tied to that. Like every other game has like something like, oh, your some stat is going down or something else, and you have to be like balance it so that way you're not doing. But a lot of people just say, fuck it, I'm just going right to the edge.
Well,
whereas it's like this, it's just sort of like, okay, here's the number. That's the deal.
Our real appeal is honestly just the enhanced powers themselves.
Oh yeah.
It makes cybernetics and nanotech look like, okay, these are the cheap knockoffs, but I got the real deal. I'm more powerful than you.
Exactly. And I like
want to be me.
Exactly. And I love that because it's like the idea of mixing superpowers into the cyberpunk actually feels like normally wouldn't sound like a right fit, just because like most people think of the superheroes, they think of DC and Marvel, and it's like, well, where does that fit in? But it's like, nah, you go with the cyberpunk first and foremost. It's cyberpunk.
Well,
and then
was,
superpowers.
When we sat down with a long list of superpowers, and there was a lot that got cut out because we're like, okay, I can't really see this being replicated by science to some degree.
Right.
Even though it's pseudoscience, okay? But it's like, that's just, I can't rationally explain this one here.
Exactly.
So there's certain things that didn't make the cut. So it does make it more scaled down. I mean, sure, you got guys who could, crush your face by ripping off a fender of a car and just smashing you with it, or burning a laser right through your gourd. But it's not quite the epic level of, like, say, DC or Marvel as far as power levels.
Exactly. And on top of that, it feels like by putting the cyberpunk atmosphere and the cyberpunk setting front and center and first and foremost, it feels more like a natural fit, where it's like almost like a gene punk sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where the superpowers, since they're tied to your genetics, don't feel out of place. It feels like, well, these are people who are just like superhuman, instead of being like, oh, these are heroes and villains. It's these are people.
Yeah. One day you're a sinner, the next day you're a saint.
Exactly. And I love that. So let's get into some of the I guess we can get into some of the powers now, because like the rest of the character creation is just like picking languages and then your starting gear,
Right.
which isn't as interesting. So let's get straight into the powers, because that's what everybody wants to know about.
That's right.
So
What can you do?
yeah, so there is limits on the powers. It tells you exactly who can use something, and how powerful they can have that power at, depending on what archetype you are.
Correct.
Looking at absorption, it's usable by
bricks,
mentalists, martial artists, blasters,
and movers and oddballs.
And movers and oddballs.
However,
and it tells you what ranks they can use them.
So bricks and blasters can use it to its fullest potential, but mentalists, martial artists, and movers can only get up to certain levels. Like mentalists can only have it up to minor, martial artists and movers can only have it up to moderate. And then we got all sorts of stuff here. We got your absorption, acid powers, adaptation, alter size, armor, animal abilities, animal control, animal speech, darkness, drain points. Yeah, energy blast. What are some other like entangle? What are some other like really cool ones? I guess fire control, fire powers, flight, force fields.
Flight's an interesting one, just with how fast you can go and the fact that it combines with flame flight.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. We got foretelling, which is kind of cool. You can like see the future as a mentalist. Which is pretty cool.
And psychometry.
And probably pisses the hell out of the GM.
Oh yeah. You got.
Well, there are stipulations if you read it where it talks about the possible outcomes of things.
Yeah, there's gravity powers, There's healing powers. And this is something else I like, that the fact that gun bunnies can get powers. Like, sure, your focus is on using guns and guns and guns and guns, but you can get superpowers too, which is really cool.
Yeah, a limited amount, but yeah, you can.
Oh, a few. You don't have a large selection, but they're really good. Like, healing. That's fantastic to have. Super useful to have. You got ice powers. You got ice powers. You got illusions, invisibility, light powers, which is really cool. I do like that you can have, like, pew! Shoot a big light laser beam.
Oh yeah.
Lightning, magnetics, mimicking. Like, we've got a really large range of powers in this system. Like, there is so many heroes and superheroes and other things like that I could think of that are covered by this system, and there is so much you can do with this system because of that, and I like that a lot. Like, you can really get almost whatever sort of superhero you could think of, but in a cyberpunk setting.
Right. Well, minus the magic.
Minus the magic, of course. But
right.
But hey, if you want that, well, we'll talk about that with Wicked Pax at some point, maybe. I've been thinking of a Shadowrun hack with using both these systems.
Well, actually, the real hack is the one that's working on right now, which is Pirates of a Shattered World, which is a techno-fantasy, which actually has a mishmash of science and magic. It's almost like, the best way to describe that game was, imagine, like Pirates of Darkwater, a little bit there, meets, the Shannara series meets Hawkmoon.
Right. Maybe we'll look at that. Maybe we'll look at that in a future episode. Mickey, maybe. Yeah. Ah.
Nudge, nudge.
Ring, nudge, nudge. We got your super strengths, which I love, because if you just get the Ultra Major, then huzzah! You can carry 50,000 pounds. Do we have any scale?
Pounds.
Do we have any scale of what weighs 50,000 pounds?
I did some research on that. An empty semi is about 35,000.
Oh my god!
Okay, so a fully loaded semi. There we go.
I love.
Fully loaded is a lot more than that.
Yeah. I like that the creator didn't even know that was the level that he was talking around here.
There's a lot to put together on a game like this.
I know.
Well, the funny thing is, each of our games has been this escalation of page count, because our first game, Spy, was only 112 pages. Pathogen Unclassified was like 140 or 160, I can't remember. And then Wicked Pax was like 250, and this one here is over 300 pages.
Oh yeah, this is 311 pages according to the PDF.
Yeah, so it's like, good
That's
night.
crazy. It is crazy. You did a great job, though, I'm gonna say.
Well, thank you. And the sad thing is, we didn't get everything we wanted to in this book. Matter of fact, because we released the Steel City source book, which did you get a copy of that, or did
you sent me a copy of that. I still need to look it over. I've been a little busy lately, but I do want to look at that and look at the sort of setting and stuff like that you got.
Well, that there, not to try and just pitch that book, but if you're doing Dark Times, you really want to get that book. The reason being is because you can pretty much. I've done this a few times where I've randomly picked 3 things out of the book and was able to put together a scenario off those things. It is loaded full of things, and I gotta really say hats off to Richard Kelly, my editor, and also a fellow writer as well. He put a lot of stuff in there as well too. So I mean,
yeah.
You see, whoever you have doing the editing passes, proofreading, has done a very good job. One thing I've noticed in a lot of systems is they have inconsistencies, or things will contradict each other, different rules. And I haven't noticed that nearly as much in this.
Yeah, usually what happens is I'll write it, and Richard takes it from troll speak to make a human. And then he says, okay, he'll have like a long list of things, which it'll take us a few nights just to sit down for several hours each night. where, okay, I got a question about this. How does this rule work? Because I may have had it in my brain on something, and I may have forgotten to put it on the thing. He catches me on that. So, I mean, he does a damn good job on that. So we're good at bouncing things off each other a lot on that. So we'll catch each other on things. Mostly he's catching me like, okay, was there something on this thing that I missed? And I'm like, oh, crap, I didn't put it in there. But here's how it works, because it's rattling around my brain. I didn't think to write it down.
Yeah,
So,
I hear that as someone who's writing his own system right now. That's always a concern. But yeah,
it's tough.
But back to the super strength thing though. Like there's a game I've been playing recently called Yakuza Zero, and there's one move that you can do it in it where you basically can pick up like anything off the street and then smack someone around with it. And the final finishing move that you can do with this particular fighting style is you just take the thing, like knock a guy down, and then just take the thing and smash it over him. Like you can do this with a bicycle if you want to.
Nice.
So I'm just imagining doing that with a semi now, just like picking up the semi and smashing it down onto it. It's like, oh no, you killed him.
Oops.
What did you do?
Street and probably the building next to him.
Yeah, this is true. Anyway, so other powers, you got telekinesis, telepathy. That's sort of more for your mentalist, which is great. Good to have. Good options to have. Teleportation. Your unarmed superiority. This is an interesting one because it basically just gives you new moves. It gives you new moves that you can do at unarmed, instead of like being a power per se, which is like interesting. It becomes more of like a fighting style.
This is one of the ones that is amazing for the martial artist.
I think it's primarily for the martial artist. In fact, like it's a requirement for the martial artist, isn't it?
Well, others can have it, like Bricks can even have it, but they can't have as many options for it.
No.
Whereas martial artists, they can pretty much run with it.
I think the weird one is that gun bunnies can also get it to its full potential.
Well, sometimes they gotta get a little close combat and save the trigger finger.
I mean, you gotta have your gun fu.
That's right.
There you go. Let's see. We got Venom, not the superhero, anti-hero,
Or
whatever.
supervillain.
Or
supervillain, depends on who you're looking at,
Or anti-hero, whatever. Whoever's writing this issue. We got vibratory stuff, which is pretty cool. A little bit interesting enough. It's a second option for phasing, which was its own separate power as well.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. Wall walking, that's always fun. I love wall walking in any game, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Water control, if you want to be a waterbender. Weapon master, which is practically an essential for gun bunnies. It's sort of it's a fighting style thing, sort of like Unarmed Superiority. It gives you new moves and new abilities that you can do with your various weapons.
Right.
Which is great. Fantastic. Always fantastic. And then weather control, which holy fucking shit. Well, weather control is ridiculous.
Well, weather can be pretty nasty. I mean, villages.
It's just, hey, you want to play Storm? Just invest all your points into weather control.
Mm-hmm. You can be a badass mofo there.
Oh boy, can you? Oh boy, can you?
One power.
It's just, hey, do you want to just literally hit everyone in a 5-mile radius with lightning and whirlwinds and hail?
Sometimes it doesn't discriminate, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And then, so that's it for the hereditary powers. There's a lot of good stuff in there. You can make really fun characters with this system. Yeah. I really like it. And then we get into the mutations. Mutations are interesting because they're split up into minor and major. They always have a flat cost as opposed to the variable cost of powers.
Right.
And they have all sorts of stuff. Let's see. We got Biosense, Clairaudience, Clairvoyance, which is not available in hereditary powers, interestingly enough. Not even for mentalists.
Right. Yeah.
You can have claws, you can confuse people, empathy. it's weird. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, it's interesting that you got more psychic powers in here than you do in the hereditary powers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the enhanced and hereditary powers, those are a little more powerful though. Whereas the mutants, they're not as powerful, but they have a little bit more of a garden variety of different things, just lower levels.
Yeah. We got extra limbs, which is, that's you wouldn't be a mutation list without extra limbs. Also, the description on it is great. You have an extra limb. This is handy, but
Yeah, like a little humor.
Gills, gliders, hide fur, scales, horns, all sorts of lots of physical stuff. Illumination. Imitating voice and sound is also another really useful one because useful utility one because boy howdy, can that come in handy. Especially if you have especially if you were to take that DNA thing and have the morph, you could just become anyone.
Oh yeah, you're a old trickster there.
Yeah. Increased attribute, which is honestly a fantastic one, and yet the bane of any person trying to do a build, because it's unreliable.
Well, you're a mutant. Your whole body's unreliable.
Yeah, that's true. So you can take this mutation up to 3 times, and you get a +1 to attributes, which is great, but you have to roll randomly for it, which is that can make things difficult.
Health above a 6.
It's true. You got large skeleton, leaper, which is if you want to do super jumps and such. Levitate, which I find hilarious because you can't really get very high off the ground. You just sort of float lazily through the air.
Mm-hmm.
Pheromones to help, which helps with social, especially helpful since you can't be very charismatic. Photosynthesis if you just want to be a plant. Poison glands, radar, skunk, spines and quills, thermal vision. All those are the minor ones. Then we get into the major mutations where you get lots of big stuff, big good stuff.
Oh yeah.
You get armored skin, which allows you to do a sonic spin dash into people. Essentially, you roll up into a ball, roll at high speed, and then do damage to people by rolling into them, which is great. It's really obvious that you're a mutant, but it's really good. We got bioelectric charge for shocking people, biokinetic force barrier, which is weird and interesting.
Oh yeah, it's I kind of like that one myself as well.
Yeah, chameleon displacement, which
What mutants are.
Yeah.
Now displacement, that has been used so many interesting ways at different demos I've done, because the character we have in there, XL, he has that.
Yeah.
And there was one time where one of the characters who was playing him, he was holding his action, and then somebody threw a car at this guy, and what he did was he was throwing it at XL, and that's when XL basically displaced one of the bad guys right in front of the way of the car and got creamed.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, yeah. That's so good.
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting power. Very underrated. Oh,
I love that. That's actually great.
Yeah.
On top of that, I could also see it being used for hostage situations to switch out and then just beat the tar out of it.
Actually, that did happen one time too, where someone was trying to hold someone hostage and he didn't switch places with the hostage, and then he just proceeded to whip his ass.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Then we got energy drain, increased attribute major. Same benefit, same problem again.
Mm-hmm.
Big attribute increase, completely random.
Mm-hmm.
You got life drain, very useful to keep yourself alive. Mind speak, phantasm, which is like illusion on steroids. Poison gland, poltergeist, psionic blast, radiation. Radiation emitter is a really interesting one too, because you're just emitting radiation, which is a horribly debilitating damage over time.
Yeah, it's not really a good thing to be around.
Yeah, you don't want to be around that. No.
My sperm died!
Oh no! Rearrange memories is fascinating because that's like the ultimate in social manipulation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one's terrifying. That's if you want to straight up be.
It's permanent.
Oh yeah, if you want to be Purple Man from like Jessica Jones, you can do some nasty stuff with that.
Oh yeah.
Like between that and like telepathy or something from the Hereditary Powers list. Boy, Regenerative Burst is great because because not only can you use this on yourself, but it's used on what is it, everyone in the area or
so yeah, so you have to be careful because it could actually apply to bad guys too.
yeah, but even so, like you could just get in the midst of your buddies, you give them a burst of health, and it's like, hey, yeah, everybody's good to go.
Keeps them from bleeding to death.
Scrambler, shape change. Oh, shape change. Yeah, you don't even need the morph ability from the Hereditary Powers list, do you? You just grab shape change and voice copying, and then suddenly you are everyone.
Well, it's a real good protective thing for mutants who are on the hiding out from society.
Exactly.
Find that with the rearranged memories.
Oh God.
Ooh.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. The
The
amount
ultimate doppelganger.
the amount of like nonsense you could do with that is terrifying.
Yes.
Now I want to do that as a villain. Oh dang it! That'd make a good villain. And then wings. I like the wings one too because it's like in most games that where you have the mutations, you know, if you've got wings, they're out all the time, and you're just obviously a mutant, and there's no way of hiding it. But this, you sprout them like you can have them out and you can put them away by spending energy, which is great. I think that's really good and really useful because it's not like an immediate death sentence to take this power.
Yep.
And then the other cool thing is that if you're a mutant, you can take negative mutations. Odd that there's only minor ones. Was there intended to be major ones?
Yeah, there is.
Is there?
It's,
Did I completely miss that?
Minor. Page 147.
Oh, there it is. Jeez, I completely missed that. Yeah, there's negative minor mutations and negative major mutations, and you can take them sort of like taking complications in the talent section to get more points to spend on mutations. So you can potentially get more powers than anybody else in the game right from the get-go by just taking negative mutations to get more mutations.
Yeah.
Granted, these are really bad. But hey, they could be really useful.
Yep.
I think the most fun one is infectious, just because it's like, hey, fuck everyone else.
Yeah. That one can be a bit troublesome.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's mutants. They're fun. And then Nanotech. Oh, man, that fucking picture in the beginning of Nanotech is so cool. Oh shit, that's really really cool.
Which one is that one? The person in the armored suit. Yeah.
Yeah, with the gun arm. That thing is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Nanotech gives you a lot of useful things. Advanced antibodies for giving you a bonus against like diseases and poisons. Resist a thing to resist pain, stun, or unconsciousness. Like a lot of these are help with like saves and other things like that, and like self healing and other things, or like being able to aim better. A lot of them feel more like passive bonuses. I mean, granted, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, hell, being able to have like these, if you stack up a whole bunch of passive bonuses, then you can become like a god of like just regular stuff, you know. There's an audio crusher that lets you do sonic blasts, kind of like the Sonic power. A backup heart for health saving throws. Nanite spray for healing. colonized gyri, which that increases intelligence, musculature, makes you stronger, coloring change, which for disguising yourself, boosters in your hands and feet to fly. So if you want to be Iron Man, there you go. Endocrine boosters for making you better at skills, I think. Enhanced sensory, epidermal keratinization, flesh ugh. The flesh pockets is always horrifying to me. It's so gross. I will admit. It's so gross.
Yeah.
Telekinetic potential, hard ear system, hard light emitters, which is really cool to do your like walls of light and other things like that, which is really cool. Ion condensers for blasting, ion screen for shielding, iron lung, knuckle spurs, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of good stuff in the nano machines. I'm not gonna just keep going through all the powers.
Yeah, you can be here all night if you go through all the powers.
It's gonna be too much. So yeah, there's lots of stuff though. And all of them have a credit cost and a technology limit points. So
well, and also the metahuman point cost when you're building your character initially.
Yeah, so if you want, so that's another thing is you can just buy while you can buy these later on in game or just buy them with starting money. You could also use your metahuman point cost, which you normally spend on hereditary powers or mutations or things like that. You can spend them on cyberware and nanotech instead if you want to do a non-powered sort of person who's entirely technologically driven.
Depending on the scenario you're playing for the game.
True.
Yeah, and then there's cybertech, all sorts of good stuff there. Even rules on what happens if someone shoots you in the cyber limb, which is repairable, which is always useful. And that runs pretty much the gamut of the stuff that you'd expect in cybertech, as we've seen in most games. I guess the only other thing that we should talk, well, and then there's weapons. We won't go into too much detail on that. It's got the stuff you want. It's got your guns. It's got your melee weapons. It's got your cool guns, including like plasma pistols and rifles, needlers, and EMP gun, gyrojet pistol, cool stuff like that, including primitive weapons like crossbows and bows, if you want to get weird with it, and shurikens, so you can be your cyber ninja. Okay, you nerds. Lots of cool grenades, explosives, all sorts of stuff. And of course alternative ammunition.
Yep.
And upgrades for customizing your guns, and drugs, and all sorts of. So, I guess the last thing that we should talk about is the obligatory matrix sort of stuff. Like, it's in every cyberpunk system. It's the net. It is your hacking in and having a sort of what's the word? It's sort of a virtual reality internet that you can load into. You can like dive into and exist in virtual reality, and then hack into databases, have your programs. You actually have a nice like hacking subsystem here with programs and other things like that, and like cyber combat, which I appreciate because it's usually a mess when people do it, but you've kept it pretty simple. Like, it's not like overly in depth and overly like complex. It's just, hey, just do combat in the cyber world, and here's your programs and stuff to spice it up a little bit.
Right. My biggest pet peeve with a lot of previous cyber games is if someone's playing a netrunner, hacker, whatever you want to call them, if it was their time to be up, it's like, okay, everyone go out to eat dinner, we're just going to have a session with me and this guy here who's trying to get inside.
Yeah, I hate that.
And it's like, oh, man. So it's okay, how do we streamline this? So we came up with this concept where it works just like combat, works pretty fast. And depending on where you're going into, whether it's like, say, a low-level rent hotel up until a corporate office, you have different levels. So if I'm basically hacking into some crappy little hotel, I only have one level of penetration I have to get into. Whereas if I'm doing corporate office, I have 4 levels I have to get into. Now, each of those levels I have to try and, get past and, outdo their system. And once I do that, I can hopefully successfully get what I'm needing. And along the way, I might have certain programs that might help me out with certain things, and they might have certain programs that are help try and counteract those things. So as long as they have their programs up ahead of time, which they should if they're building the character, and you as a GM, you just have a few things already set up. You can even make some generic ones up for, okay, generic corporate office, okay, generic like a police station, a generic apartment complex, things like that. And you can use it that way. So the combat should go pretty smooth, pretty fast, and yeah.
Yeah, it's basic in comparison to other systems, but I think in a way that's a strength because it's not sidelining the whole game for the hacker, but it still feels cool to do instead of just like
Right.
The hacking in Cyberrun. Wow, I can't speak.
Cyberpunk 2020.
Cyberpunk and Shadowrun. There we go. Really turned me off of the whole Matrix thing. When I've run those games or played in them, I pretty much just remove it and change it so it's a hacking system closer to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because, it dominates the game.
Yeah, it can.
When I played Shadowrun a couple times, I did love playing a hacker because I actually did love that whole subsystem of it. But at the same time, I do recognize can be kind of problematic. Now, granted, I think Shadowrun did do a great job of fixing it in a way in at least 4th and 5th edition. I've only really read 5th edition, but they did a great job of fixing it just by saying, okay, it's wireless now. So you can be with the rest of the team doing stuff. Like, even if you're just strictly a hacker, you can actually hack people's cybernetics and other gear and such and mess with them in combat, which is really cool. It's a really clever idea. And I think Cyberpunk Red is also moving in that direction by having it be more augmented reality than virtual reality and streamlining it down to more something akin to what you're doing. I guess a question for me is: do you ever think you'll do something like release a source book about the net and the Matrix and have give it more depth to it for people who want it, or do you think you're just gonna leave it as sort of basic stuff?
Right now, it's kind of last on my list of things I want to do for this.
Fair enough.
Because we just like I said, we released Steel City source book. We're about to release the NPC booklet, which will have a bunch of NPCs, good, bad, neutral, and an adventure at the end. Actually, I'm hoping, knock on wood, I can release that by the end of this month.
Woo!
Yeah, and then we go on to the next book, which is Corporations, Villains. Yeah, you'd think I would actually know this game here.
You'd think you actually know the game.
Villains, Allies, and Corporations.
There we go. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, I think we've covered pretty much everything in the book that's important. There is a nice little adventure in there. Oh, we didn't talk about combat.
I can pretty much tell you quickly. Combat works much like your character skill rolls. Basically, you roll your skill, add your relative attribute, and you meet or beat a target number. Usually, a target number, which you're going to start seeing in more of our games as we're either going forward or going back through and revising, because right now we're actually revising Spy. Defensive number, DN. And your DN is basically what you have to hit. So let's say, for example, I got some thug who's got a reflexes of 3. So you add that to a 5, he has a base of 8. That's without any kind of other modifiers to him. So if I got this guy over here who wants to attack this thug, his DN's at 8. So it means I have to get better than 8 to hit him.
Yeah.
That's with no other modifiers.
Keeps it real simple.
It does, and that's really the way it should be.
I think the only wrinkle to it is how you do actions, which I think is an interesting thing to talk about. You basically have it like if you just do one action turn, then it's treated as normal. But if you want to do multiple actions, you can do up to 4, I think, or is it up to 3?
Yeah, max you can have is up to 4.
Yeah, and then with each, you have to declare all of them at the beginning of your turn, and then all those actions receive a penalty. Based on how many you're doing. Which, in some cases, especially with how limited the number range is in this game, can really discourage you from trying to do too much at once. But I think that's honestly for the best in a way, because it keeps things flowing to just do one thing at a time.
Agreed.
If you have really good stats, or you have stacked the situation in your advantage, you won't be doing more than 2 actions generally in a turn.
Yeah. And that's all there really is to the game. It's a good system. I highly recommend it. I really like it. It's got the tone that I want. It's got a lot of cool things that you can do with it. It's a very different take on supers, and it's a really interesting take on Cyberpunk.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it.
It's fun.
Any last thoughts there, Dad?
Not really.
Okay. Well, I guess that's where we'll wrap this for now. Tune in next week where we'll be looking at another system. I'm not sure which one yet, but we'll see you next week, and hopefully we can have Mickey back on another time to talk about some other systems. He's with Polyhedral Knights. Check out their catalog. They've got Dark Times, they've got Wicked Pacts, Spy, Pathogen Unclassified, and Pirates of a Shattered World coming out soon.
We actually have another one in the works down the pipe too.
Another one?
Yeah.
I haven't even heard about this one. Please do tell.
It's actually a Western.
Oh, that's cool. Is there any special wrinkles to it?
No, actually, it's gonna be just a straight up Western game.
Straight spaghetti Western.
Everyone's doing some sort of twist on things. We just want to do a nice, clean, just kind of simple Western, and we're probably actually going to be using the Pathogen Unclassified system, which is different from all the other ones we've done.
Oh, really? I thought it was the same.
Now, Pathogen Unclassified actually has its own unique system.
Huh.
Because we tried using it for what we call it the spy mechanic, because all of our games so far, with the exception of Pathogen, have used what we call the spy mechanic, because the spy was our first game.
Right.
So we started doing it that way, this feels like it's been shoehorned into here. It doesn't feel like it belongs. So we really wrote that whole system around that. We actually call that our survival mechanic system. And we figured a kind of a primitive type setting like a Western would be perfect for that.
That actually does make sense, yeah.
Matter of fact, at Gen Con, I was supposed to premiere a demo of that. And it's called Desperados in Dust.
It's the new D&D.
That's right.
There we go.
Right. Watch out.
Confuse everyone. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll see you all next week with another Tabletop to Showcase. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.